know what it's like to be ridiculed and unable to share my experiences. I want to give everyone a safe haven to share their encounters with these magnificent beings, and I would love to hear yours. Please email them to me at cwlenagarrett@gmail.com. If you'd like to support me in my journey to the truth, my cash out is $Selena Bigfoot. I look forward to hearing from you. I want to introduce my guest. He is awesome. His name is Tex from Texas Front Porch, and I am so glad that you're here with us today. Come on up, Tex.
Hey, girl.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm sitting here trying to do two things at once, and you know I'm blind. I'm petting her because she's wanting up here in my lap and trying to talk to you too. All right, come on. Here's your 1 minute showbiz.
That's your official co-host.
Yes, she is. And I decided to match her today, if you could tell. But anyways, I am so happy that you're here. I had told you and Gary last time that I wanted y'all on here because, you know, his stories with Bigfoot and then your Bigfoot stories. And so I have been excited to hear what happened with these Dogman, because that's a whole different, another world. You know, it's bad enough that we have these creatures out there that are Bigfoot, that walk on two legs and all that. But to know that there's a creature out there that resembles a dog, but yet upright walking on two legs. And they say that they are unreal built, you know. The masculinity and stuff of these things is amazing. It blows my mind. But anyways, hey, everybody, I love y'all. I've missed you so much. I've been a little busy. And I just have missed y'all. So I am so glad to be on here saying hello to everybody. So anyways, Tex, tell me if you don't mind. Like I said, I've been kind of excited about hearing about, you said, somebody said, I think I caught the tail end of your show, and it was you and Paranormal Paul, I think it was, and y'all were discussing you having a Dogman sighting when you were a teen. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. I was 16 actually, and I was, of course, you know, a lot of people know I was raised up. I'm about as country as they come, and I was coming back from rabbit hunting, and I was walking down the road that borders our place, and or on the side, bordered the side of our place, and I had a couple of rabbits on my belt and shotgun with, you know, my little 410s all I had, and no ammo for it. And, walking down the road, I was just fixing to jump the fence and take a shortcut across our pasture, you know, do a beeline for the house, right? And I don't know. And to this day, I don't know if I interrupted him or he was just running at full speed and I happened to be there. I have no idea what happened. Or I woke him up. I don't know. But he come out of the brush on my left-hand side about 25, 30 feet away from me. And it was still daylight. So it's not like I saw a shadow or anything like that. You know, this was up close and personal. And he come running across the road in front of me, and he dove over our barbed wire fence, that one I was just fixing to cross over, and went into our pasture and then hit the long grass, and then he was gone. He went down to all fours. But when he was running, when he was running across the road in front of me, he turned his head at me and he snarled at me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I was scared to death, but it's not like, it was more of a, I think looking back on it, it was more of a, you know, you stay right there where you're at, you'll be all right. You know, just, you know, leave me alone. I'm doing my thing type thing.
Sort of a warning for you.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, as I explained it, it seems like, you know, when you explain what's going through your head and what happened and everything, it seems like a really long time, but it was just, I mean, the whole sighting was just seconds long, you know. And, but it, what? But anyway, the the part that really is kind of it stuck with me, and every time I draw it, he's got his head turned at me, and I'm no Jason McLean artist, but by any stretch of the means, but I can do a pretty good rendering of it, and I mean he was running, and I tried to explain the stance the other night, and it was like a fighter stance, like a grappler stance, and he was up on his toes, knees bent, kind of crouched, and his hands are up like this, and when he turned his head and he growled at me, one of the things that really popped out to me was the coloring of his mouth and his tongue, because though, and I feel like a broken record, but the thing that old wives tell is if you're looking for a smart dog, you get one with black in his mouth, right? And he had black and pink mottled gums and tongue. And that's, I think, aside from the overall appearance of him, that alone stands out and says canine to me. Okay, I haven't looked at primates; they may have the same thing. I don't know, but the way he looked and the way he moved was, I didn't know anything else to call it but a werewolf at the time. I really didn't, because the term Dogman hadn't been coined at that point, because I'm old enough to fart dust, so that was a long time. But he was, at the time, I thought he was about 6.5 feet tall. But years later, I was at work with a co-worker, and he'd had a Bigfoot encounter, and I was talking to him about my Dogman encounter and stuff. And we were walking through the building, and we were going back to the storage area, and and this is a big old boy. He's like 6'5", 6'6", and he says, "Well, Tex, how big was this thing?" I said, "Well, hell, Mike, it wasn't no bigger than them doorways right there." He put his hand on my chest and he stopped me. And he looked at me. He said, "Tex, those are 8-foot doors." And I said, "Well, hell, I guess he was a little bigger than I thought he was."
Oh my gosh.
So he was probably about 7.5 feet tall. And like I said, he was crouched, so he was probably every bit of 7.5 to 8 feet if he stood up straight. But he was covered in hair, but he wasn't covered with thick hair. The only thick hair he had was started at like his hairline and went down the back of his head and down his shoulders and down his back into a V. And he didn't. I don't think he had a tail. I don't ever draw it with a tail.
You've drawn it, so you've drawn pictures of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've drawn countless pictures. Well, if I had any, I'd show them to you. But he wasn't like, he was barrel chested and he was real narrow to hip, but he wasn't like big and bulky. He was more streamlined built, I guess kind of like a basketball player, which is a lot of what the description you hear of Bigfoot down here in the South is they're leaner, they're not as massive as the ones up north seem to be, but which tracks with the climate.
Malnutritioned and humongous. That's the only two I could explain as far as your size,
Yeah. And I think it's more to do with the climate, the heat and everything that they deal with down here than it is, versus, because they got plenty to eat, plenty, down here in Texas. I mean, we've got, every kind of wildlife, you can think about, and, and we was always hearing tales of, chickens getting stolen, foals getting tore up, or even missing, calves the same way, Um, but it was always blamed on either a big cat in the area, which we had them come through the area. They still come through the area down there. But me and of course I've known Randy, over on our channel for 40 years, and me and him camped at, hunted and fished in the same areas. And we were talking about it one time. He said, we never did run across that mysterious pack of wild dogs that used to kill everything. I said, I know, right? Never did. But when the rest of his body was covered in thin hair, you could see the skin underneath, and it was like a charcoal color. But it was kind of long, like the hair hung down off his arms about that long, but it wasn't real thick.
Yeah.
I remember his thighs were probably, everybody talks about being massive built. His thighs were huge.
I imagine so.
But.
And you felt no fear whatsoever?
Oh, yeah, I was scared to death.
Okay.
I froze. But I don't, and like I said, after looking back on it, I didn't get the type of fear that was like he was going to eat me or anything. It was just like I don't know. It just felt different. It felt different than the second encounter did, actually.
Okay. I can't wait to hear about that one.
But anyway, I walked home, and when I had a choice to make, because I could either he went the way I was fixing to go, right? Mm-hmm. So I had a choice. I could either go through the barbed wire fence and follow him into this tall grass, which I didn't want to do, right? Or I could take the long way home, which meant going up the side of our place, across the top of it, and back down our driveway on the other side. So that's what I did. The whole walk is pretty much a blur, except for I remember turning the first corner and thinking to myself, if I stay on the road, I've got my gun. At least I can take a swing at him with my gun if he comes at me. But nothing happened, and I got home. I walked in the back door. We lived in a trailer house. I walked in the back door, and I kind of remember, it's kind of like, the memory is kind of like a tunnel vision type thing. I can see myself. I still have the picture of walking in the hallway, and seeing. I see the kitchen table, right, and I see the chairs, and I remember walking up and just kind of collapsing into a kitchen chair, and I remember setting my gun on the table, which is a big no-no in my house.
He was probably in shock. That's what happened.
I was. And my mom, she was in the kitchen. She was, I don't know, doing dishes or cooking, or I can't remember what she was doing. And I remember her turning to look at me, and I think she was fixing to scold me for when she saw the gun. But she got this look on her face, and she's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you? You're white as a ghost." And no, Mojo, I never did look for tracks. I wasn't in that frame of mind. But and it was a hard packed gravel road. There wouldn't have been nothing. But I tried to tell her what had happened, and I tried to talk, but nothing would come out. It's just, I just sat there with my mouth moving. And my sister lived on the same property as we did, next to us. And she called my sister, and she says, "Hey, get over here. Something's wrong with your brother." And my sister came over, and it took them better part of an hour to settle me down enough where I could tell them what was going on, what had happened.
I imagine so.
But, and after I told them, they were trying to not necessarily tell me that I didn't see what I saw, or tell me I was crazy or anything like that. They were trying to maybe rationalize what I saw and, I think get me over the initial shock of it. And over the years, I stuck to my guns on what I saw. We even gave it a pet name. We called it Fred. But um,
So how long was it before you seen the other one?
well,
Was
I didn't see it. I didn't see it a second time. Well, I think I did. Okay, it's a long story. There's three encounters. I believe three encounters with the same creature. Um,
just
but it
crud?
was only, yeah, there was two sightings, one during the day and one at night. But the other one was just the other one. It took me probably the better part of a year to get back to doing what I was doing and going out and everything, because I wouldn't go anywhere without a, being loaded for bear. I wouldn't even go down to the barn, bust ice out of the water trough or feed or whatever.
Bless your heart.
I was just, I got to where I was scared of the dark. I quit camping. I quit fishing. I wouldn't go nowhere by myself hardly. And like I said, my sister lived just a few yards away from us. And, I guess about 40 yards, 50 yards away from us, something like that. And if it was night, we had what everybody calls a booger light, but that was the only light on the place. But if it was night and I had to go from one house to the other, it was at a dead run. I mean, I was scared to death. And, but finally, after I guess about 6, 8, 9 months, something like that, I started, I got to where I was mad because I wasn't used to being, you know, hemmed up like that. And that's what I felt like. I felt like this thing was almost like I was being bullied. And I got mad. I don't know if I got mad because I was tired of being scared or what it was. But I said, I ain't seen this thing since. It didn't kill me when it had the chance, you know. And I started taking little baby steps. I started like camping out in the front yard or backyard, or then I'd go camp in a pasture. And over the months, I started going back to where I was. And about a year later, I I was going to the place that I really enjoyed hunting. It was fantastic. It was on an old man's property. He had like 1,600 acres or something like that, 600 acres, 1,600 acres, something like that. And half of it he had in a hayfield, and the other half was undeveloped, and it was just as thick as it could be. But you would travel the game trails in this place, and it would open up into these clearings, and they were differed in sizes, you know. Um, but there was no deadfall that was across the fence, and I always ran up that deadfall and jumped over the fence. And I was just about to step up on that tree, and this place was probably a mile from the house, and I heard something walking in the brush. And there was a set of twins that lived on the other side of this place, and they hunted it too. And I went to school with them. I knew them.
Yeah.
And I heard this thing, whatever it was, walking. And I called out to whatever or whoever it was. And I said, "Hey," I said, "who's out there, you know?" And it stopped. And I said, "Look," I said, "David dug at one of y'all, let me know." And I called out a couple of times. And it would just shift its weight every time I said something. So finally, I said, "Look," I said, "if you don't say something, I'm gonna shoot, right?"
Yeah.
And at that point, I probably did something that wasn't the brightest thing that I've ever done in my life, and I popped a round off up in the air, and it was like, now if you listen to me and Gary, or when Gary was on last week, um, we talk about that us getting rushed or bluff charge or whatever it was in camp that night, and that's the only time in Brown Springs that I ever felt like drawing a weapon. Because, and because it sounded exactly like what was coming through the trees at this time with me.
Yeah.
But when this thing started busting through busting through the trees and stuff, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to see it again. I tucked tail and ran. I didn't even look back. I ran all the way home. That is that at that point, I was convinced this thing was probably going to kill me. And if it was going to, I didn't know. I didn't want to know it was coming. I just if it was going to snatch me up, I didn't want to see it. I don't know. I was just scared. And again, that set me back on my heels, and I didn't go out for a little while, but it didn't take me as long this time. I said, well, this thing's had two chances, and it ain't done nothing to me yet. You know, so. And then a while later, my mom and dad were out of town, and I was at home by myself. And no, wait a minute. Yeah. So anyway, at any rate, it was storming, and lightning was flashing. I was looking out the kitchen window because I love watching it storm. And there was a power pole that was on the back of our property over there on the fence line, and I started seeing something when the lightning would flash. I started seeing something like it looked like it was standing next to the power pole, and it was raining cats and dogs, and thundering and lightning. It was a hell of a storm, but I noticed this thing, and I started watching. And every time the lightning would flash, it would be like it changed its position. It would be leaning on the pole. It would be standing up straight, and that type of thing. And I got so scared that I went and got my daddy's gun. I loaded it with buckshot and grabbed some slugs, and I called a buddy of mine I went to school with. I said, "Hey man," I said, "I got this going on." He said, "You wimp, blah blah blah. You're just seeing things, all this kind of stuff." So, but anyway, I finally ended up just passing out. I think from exhaustion. And I did go and kind of look around to see if I could see any sign of something been standing there,
Yeah.
and I couldn't see anything. Of course, the rain had washed everything out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's a whole different ball game with these critters, man. It's for some reason, and having talked to, hundreds of people throughout the years after I started doing this, it seems like they just like to scare you for some reason. They don't necessarily want to hurt you.
They want to observe and then tell you, don't come no closer, don't go past this point, or something like that.
Well, it's like they enjoy scaring us.
Well, that's the only thing they can do, basically, unless they're just going to straight out kill somebody.
Yeah. Now I believe that he was responsible for about a year before my sighting. We had a dog. We had a dog go missing, and we found him because we started smelling him. And he was underneath the house, and I had to go into the house and get him. And when I pulled him out, it looked like somebody had just held him up by his front legs and just gutted him.
Oh my Jesus!
And
anything missing?
Just his guts.
So his guts. Okay.
But and my dad said, well, he probably got into it with a bobcat and all that kind of stuff, crawled up here and died. I said, well, okay, whatever. At that time I hadn't seen nothing.
I was going to say, because it was split all the way down, and that's not how a bobcat would,
Right. Well, he was like clawed open. I mean, it was like, just ripped, and it was tore up. But it's not like somebody, cutted him like a deer. It was just like somebody, just ripped it open. And Dad said, well, he probably got into it with bobcat, crawled up here and died. I'm like, okay, whatever, better than I do. And then, like I said, that was before I saw anything or heard anything or anything like that. Well, then, fast forward years, and I never was much for talking about it. I talked about it one time. A bunch of us guys were together, and we were hanging out, and we were drinking and playing cards and stuff. And we were all, we got, like I said, we were drinking, and we all got telling spooky stories and all this kind of stuff. And I said, well, you know, so I told what happened to me, and everybody's like, oh yeah, sure, you know, blah blah blah, whatever. I'm like, okay, you know. And there was this one of my best friends. He got real quiet, and then after we kind of broke up and everything, I pulled him aside. I said, hey man, you all right? And that's when he told me that he saw something that was kind of similar to what I had seen. And I've his was looked different than mine. He was long and lanky and gnarly, and was on all fours all the time. But it had ran up out of a field when he was driving down the road, and ran up and looked in the. He was on all fours, and he was driving a Mustang, and it looked in his passenger window at him when he was driving
Wow.
down. But
Scary.
yeah,
Scary.
yeah, you know, I mean, there's no boy that I know that had an encounter of one that had a chain around his neck that pretty much did the same thing. Ran up beside the car. He said he actually stuck his head inside the car.
It had a chain around its neck.
It had a chain around its neck.
Huh. As if somebody was keeping it chained, or as if it just.
The way it seemed, from what he described, you know, and I mean, we, you know, we hear stories all the time about, you know, the government, you know, maybe experimenting on these things, trying to, you know, make soldiers out of them or whatever, weaponizing them. There was there was a report that Danielle Stedman, and she's the one that I first shared my story with on Dogman Diaries, and she had a report come in from an anonymous source that they work for the government or whatever, and they were either aware or had been there when it happened, but it was a facility where they were growing these things, and it was over, I think it was South Africa, and where they housed them in a facility, and they all escaped one time and wiped out an entire village before they, you know, neutralized them all.
Jeez, I've heard that about some Bigfoots in like Afghanistan. They went into a village, started taking the women from the village, and that they called troops out to destroy, and, you know, to get them all gathered in one place and destroy a big, huge pack of them.
Yeah.
That they were stealing the women from the village in Afghanistan. That's what I heard on one of the documentaries. So I read and listen, or not read. I listen to a lot of documentaries. I don't read much because my eyes water as soon as I start reading. I have no idea why. But listen, y'all, I'm going to take a quick break and tell y'all this. When I'm gone during the week, my babies don't get to see me. And so what you're seeing is Ginger eating her mama up. So if this bothers y'all, I am so sorry. I know it's not a professional show, but it probably won't ever end. So if it offends you, I'm sorry. This is just not a professional show. I'm going to have my babies with me because I've missed them too. Anyways.
Well, again, everybody loves Ginger, by the way.
She's eating her mama up. Are y'all noticing?
Yeah. She's like, my mama.
Anyway, so tell me, you had the Dogman sighting the first time. You had your second sighting when it was against the post during a thunderstorm. So then when was did you have a third sighting of a Dogman, or was it?
I didn't. Well, I didn't have a third sighting of that. It was the three encounters that I had were the first sighting in the road crossing, and then whatever I heard coming out of the brush when I was hunting, and then the third encounter was the sighting during the storm. So, and then I didn't really have anything happen until I kind of started getting into this and going out in the field, and that's when I saw my first Bigfoot.
Okay. Do you mind telling us that?
No, not at all. I had started researching with this feller, and And he researched out in Brown Springs, Oklahoma, and he said, "Man, you ought to come out there with me." I said, "All right." So we went out there, and it was my first time out there. And we pulled up to this campsite, and I parked my truck, got out of the truck. He was getting his stuff together on the other side, and I'm kind of taking in the lay of the land, just trying to pick out some landmarks and stuff because I've never been there. Didn't want to get my bearings and stuff. So because we were fixed to go down in the bottoms, I didn't want to get turned around. So we're standing we're parked on the edge of a hayfield, and there was a thin tree line that separated this hayfield and a wheat field. And I was looking through this tree line into this wheat field, just looking around. And this critter just stood up in the middle of the wheat field and looked like he was fixing to cross the street, looked both ways, and then took off running down to the bottoms. Well, I could see him from about the waist up until he hit the fire break, and then I saw him about 2 steps head to toe. And then he went into the trees and disappeared. And my exact words were, "I'll be damned, there goes one right there." And he's like, "What?" And he got all miffed because he'd never seen that one, but other people had. I said, "Yeah, he just ran off out of the wheat field down there in the bottoms." And we went and looked at the wheat, and the wheat at that time was about 4 feet high. So this critter had to be every bit of 8 foot. But he was probably about 50 yards away from him. And he was solid black, and he had a slick coat, like he well groomed and everything.
Okay.
And he didn't have the pointed head, the conical head like everybody talks about. He had a round head. Again, he was built like a basketball player. He wasn't real, massively built, but he was tall. And the gait, every time I've seen them when they're moving, they have the same gait, and it's very, very much like the patty gait on the
leaned over a little bit.
Yeah, they're kind of leaned over. Their knees are bent, and their head. If you've ever 2-stepped or waltzed, a really good dancer, their head don't bob. Okay, and that's how these things move all the time. Their head don't bob. They take all the change in terrain in their legs and everything. They're very graceful. Even moving through just brush that I've moved through the same brush that they have, and I'm pushing vines out of the way, hacking stuff, and picking my steps and everything, and they're just walking through it like it's nothing. I mean, it's amazing. But if you look at any wild animal that moves through the brush, they move the same way. They don't wait a minute. It's like they can get through that stuff because they do it all the time. We're not equipped to do it. We don't, I guess if we did it every day and our life depended on it, I guess we'd learn how to move that way too. But they move so gracefully through all this rough terrain. It's amazing to watch. But that was my first Bigfoot sighting. It was a daylight sighting. It was 8:30 in the morning. And when we went ahead and went in, and we went down at the bottoms, and we turned to left, which would take us across his path that he was headed on. So we're walking down through the bottoms down there, and we start hearing something up on the ridge, and we can hear it walking a little bit, and then we'll hear like 3 what's either wood knocks or mouth pops. I think they do both. And then we'd walk another 100 or so yards, and we would hear it again. And what we theorized was going on.
Let me let her out. Okay. I'm listening, Tex. What it is, she's also getting thirsty and hot. So right. we had the door shut, and so I opened the door. So I hope it ain't too loud in there. If it is, let me know and I'll shut the door.
No, you're good. So what we theorized was happening was there may have been a family group or something, down there, and he was pushing them forward so we wouldn't walk up on them. But
Uh-huh.
my second sighting, and I started going out by myself and everything, and me and him got sideways, and he don't research down there no more. But I kind of took up the torch and did it. So I did a lot of researching for a few years by myself. I would go down there and spend, days and nights at a time, camped out. And I had a lot of encounters at night, a lot. They would come up in the camp. They would, throw rocks at me, that kind of thing. And I'd, get vocalizations and all that kind of stuff. And I never was scared because I really got to thinking about it. You know, those of us that have went camping a lot and maybe out in these national forests and state parks and all this kind of stuff, odds are you've been around these critters and you just didn't know it.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
but it's I think they're very, very curious. And I don't think they have any inclination, for the most part, to hurt us. I think they're as different as you and I, though. And I use the analogy of if you're going down to the Congo, let's say, and you're looking for undiscovered tribes, right? You're in your little boat and you're going down the river and you see this village and you land your boat and you jump out and you go in this village and you're greeted like and you're treated like a god and you're treated to a feast and everything like that. And you say your goodbyes, you get in your little boat and you go down, another so many miles down and you see another little village and you go, oh, okay. So you paddle your boat up and you land it and everything. You walk in, and the next thing you know, are the feast, you know. And I think that they are as much. I think they're just as different as you and I in that, you know, there's good ones and there's bad ones. I mean, if
Yeah,
Grandpa
that's
Bigfoot
what I'm
was,
saying. Just like
you know,
humans, good and bad.
yeah,
I think that
exactly.
every species has good and bad in it. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
just
absolutely, absolutely. If Grandpa Bigfoot was shot in the ass back in the day, he brought his family up to not like humans. I mean, it's just how, but we hear stories all the time of how the indigenous peoples had relationships with these things, good and bad. I mean,
hmm
there's relationships that we've heard about with them trading and learning from each other. There's relationships that we've heard that they, like you were talking about, they would, steal women and children. The Lafleur massacre that took place in Oklahoma, I believe it was 1851 when it took place. Now, a lot of people say that's not true, but um, I tend to think it is. And if you've never heard that, I'll go over it real quick. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of it. There was a tribe that was having problems with. They said these Bigfoot were, and I think they were dealing with Genoskwa, which are also called the face eaters. They're known to be nasty, and or Gugway, they're also called. But
yes.
um, they were stealing women and children. Well, Lafleur was a captain. He was half Chickasaw or Choctaw and half French, and he was a captain in the Light Horse Brigade. And they reached out to him, and he came down and brought his troops to help solve this problem. Well, there were three brothers, no, two brothers, and a father that was in his troop, and they were the dadgummit, I can't think of their last name. It was like Butt or Butte or something like that. But they were all huge. The shortest one was the youngest brother, and he was like 18, and he was almost 7 feet tall. And they were just big men. And so they locate this troop of Bigfoot, this clan, and when they rolled up on them, there was a pile of dead children that in their little camp, and they had been fed on, eaten and all that kind of stuff. So they wiped out every Bigfoot there was there, but it also cost LaFleur his life. According to the legend, um, one of them swiped and knocked his horse out from underneath him, killed his horse, and then when LaFleur stood up, the Bigfoot ripped his head off. And
Oh my gosh. The
but
power these things have.
oh, I know,
Just if you sit and think about it, it's crazy. If you sit and think about the strength and
yeah,
how they could just go house to house and just annihilate everybody, you know what I mean? Uh,
oh, absolutely,
then you hear stories about the one that touched me. Um, it touched me so much that I couldn't get it off my mind for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. I was like, I just kept thinking about being in his situation. The logger Tex, the logger that was going on a hike, and he went
hmm
on logging a logging area, and he found a deer that was killed like way up in the tree, and he walked on down the hill and told the loggers. They said, what are you doing on this property? It's a logging area. And he said, I was just hiking. I'm up here taking care of my aunt's animals while she has surgery.
right,
And he said, uh, something about there's a deer up there in the tree. Did y'all do that? And the logger said, show us what you mean. And they couldn't believe that there was a deer that high in a tree. But anyways, so he wanted to just continue hiking. So the loggers went back to work, and the hiker, when he did, he was walking, and the whole pile of logs, I'm talking heavy logs, rode
hmm
on top of him. It had punctured lungs, and it had broke his arms, and just done all kind of stuff to him physically. And he said he was just laying there, and he said all of a sudden he heard them, and he just thought he was fixing to die. And he said he could feel the warm blood coming out his mouth and his ears and everything. And all of a sudden, a big Bigfoot, there was two of them, he said, and he said that you could tell the Bigfoot was straining to get these logs off of him. And you could hear him even hoisting them. This Bigfoot
yeah,
hoist these logs, off of this man. And all they did now was move the logs. And then they just so happened the loggers drove by and seen the backpack or something like that and said, oh no, that's that guy's backpack. So they went up there and checked and found that he was crushed by the logs. But if it wasn't for the Bigfoots getting the logs off of him, he'd have died right then and there.
right,
So the lady that was canoeing, she had got a divorce, and she was canoeing down the river, and her boat turned over, and she couldn't come up to the top of the water, and she went out. She passed out. And when she woke up, they were pulling her. The Bigfoot was by her life jacket out, by her, or not life jacket, I'm sorry, by something, the back
yeah,
of her. She said they had her by the back by something, and was pulling her up out of the water. And she said that and I know if you're not 18 or older, I should have said this first. If you're not 18 or older, please do not tune into my shows, because we do talk a lot about adult matters. But she said that they had urinated and defecated, put her in a safe area, and had urinated and defecated all around her. And they did that, of course, to keep the other animals from coming to her at night.
right.
And they fed her berries and water. And she said finally 2 women come down the river in their kayak, and just so happened she yelled and they heard her, and then got help. But one more, and then I'll let you go back to talking. I just love these 3 stories. I don't know what it is. I love these 3 stories. But there was I think he was either 2 or 3, and he got lost. And when they finally did find him, it was like 2 or 3 days later. They said, how did you stay warm? What did you eat? And he said, that big bear slept beside me and kept me warm, and he fed me berries and water. I mean,
Yeah.
what bear goes and gets bowls of water? It's
Yeah.
time for people to use a little common sense. It's time for people to realize that there are some good ones, there are some bad ones, and they're not all bad. And a lot of times it's about protecting their families. And a lot of times they do like to scare. I'm sure they do. They scared me pretty bad. But I'm just saying it's not all cruel. Um, what is your opinion on that text? Do you believe those stories or?
I do. Like I said, I think there's good encounters and bad encounters. I kind of a funny one that I heard out of New Mexico, Rio Dosa, New Mexico. Um, the old gal that used to be my producer, Michelle, if you're listening, hello. Um, she had this neighbor, and they lived up on the mountain, and her neighbor was griping and about a bear that had stole 2 apples out of her kitchen window. And um, and I said, well, and I asked her, I said, what did she verbatim? What did she say? And she says, a bear stuck his hand in his window, a bear stuck his hand in my kitchen window, grabbed 2 apples, and run off. And I'm like, okay, this hold the phone just for a minute here. I said, bear don't have hands. Okay? And if you're going to grab 2 apples at the same time, it takes an opposable thumb. And I said, she lived in a trailer house. She lived in a house. Well, she lives in a trailer house. I said, how far is the window off the ground? She said, about 6, 7 feet. I said, okay, black bear don't get over about 5 to 6 feet. He can't reach up that high, much less, grab 2 apples. And they had a activity around that area before. So there's another report that I got. We were eating at K-Bob's there in Rio Dosa, and I was wearing a Bigfoot shirt. And there was this little old man. He was sitting in a booth across the restaurant, and he kept looking at me. And he started saying something. I couldn't hear him. He's a little frail old man. And I got up and I went over and I said, I'm sorry, sir. I can't understand what you're saying. And he pointed at my shirt. He goes, do you believe in that stuff? I said, yes, sir. I said, I know they exist. I've seen them. He goes, let me tell you what my best friend told me. He said he works for the highway department up by Cloudcroft. And Cloudcroft is about an hour outside of Rio Dosa. And it's up on top of a mountain. And this the only thing on top of this mountain is this little town. And there's a road in up through the canyons and a road out through the meadows and all that kind of stuff. Looks like Ponderosa when you drive down the other side. Gorgeous. He said there was two families, and they were one was going up the mountain, one was going down the mountain in on this Ponderosa looking side of it, and they come around a corner and they sideswiped each other. One of them had crossed and the other one was laying, and they sideswiped each other. So they pulled over. Everybody was fine. They were out sharing information. The 2 men were, and this Bigfoot came running out of the trees and slammed both fists down into the hood of one of their cars and screamed at them and then ran back into the trees. And he says, my buddy said that's the story that they told him. Well, when they got there, the highway department got there, he said it took them about 30 minutes to coax these people out of their cars. They were all locked up and wouldn't come out of the cars because it was whole families. It was 2 whole families that saw this,
Plenty of witnesses, of course.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
See, that's what people are so right. And I know it's a cliche and people are tired of hearing it, but I agree totally. If you think about it, they bring people in to give eyewitness testimonies and then put people in prison for the rest of their lives. And yet they won't believe a group of 60 that just seen a Bigfoot at Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
It don't make a bit of sense.
No,
60 church members just seen a Bigfoot at Gatlinburg, and you're going to sit there and argue with all 60 of them. They all decided to lie and sin on the same day. I mean, it's crazy.
Well,
it's just
I mean, it's like the goat man here in Lake Worth. It was seen, and I think it was a Sasquatch, but they call it a goat man. But this thing was seen by 20 or 30 people, and some of them were law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the same time, and it threw a tire about 500 feet.
What about that in their unit? What about them picking that up and throwing it across the yard? It wasn't drug across the yard. It was thrown across. Y'all know how huge those old central heating and air units are. Them things are humongous. They're not like the new ones. And I was like, oh my gosh, can you imagine what had the strength to pick that thing up?
Yeah, and then toss it, you know. But yeah, I mean, and I'm fortunate to have as many encounters as I have, and I've been very, very fortunate to have, you know, more than one sighting, which is, you know, you hear about all these researchers and stuff that's been done. They're on TV and stuff that's been doing this for 20 or 30 years and never even seen hide nor hair of one. Well, you're doing something wrong, or they don't like you, or something, because you're in the wrong spot. I don't know what it is, but it's like me and Pops, me and Gary, man. We've had numerous encounters and sightings together. Me and Brandy. Brandy had her first sighting when she was with me, and I mean, it was a nighttime sighting, but we watched this 8-foot creature just walk through the trees, you know. And it's see, Mojo says they've been seen digging through the dumpsters behind the CVS in Ruidoso since the fires. That doesn't surprise me. There was supposedly a.
There's Miss V and Bobby and Boondock and Cece and Gary. Hey, everybody. You know I can't see you without my glasses. And don't forget Debbie. I love every one of y'all. You know I do. Everybody watching, I love you so much, and I've missed you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tex.
Well, I was just going to say that there was that footage out of Oklahoma from the casino security cam that had one digging through the grease trap out behind and it made the news, and then it was like nothing, and you can't find anything on it, nothing.
Mm-hmm. Government take it off, take it down, stop.
See, I think so. I really think so.
They did. Of course they did. That's like the Bigfoot trapped in a barn a couple months back. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. This man was standing on the side of the road videoing all this going down. And then they're going to say, you better not tell nobody. You better, kill that story. And yet he's sitting there videoing all these different agencies coming to this scene where they've got this Bigfoot trapped in a barn. And that poor thing, no offense, I know they're so huge they could have probably killed everybody on sight. But I'm just saying, imagine how scared that Bigfoot was trapped in that barn with all these, because they just want to make it back home to their families. I'm pretty sure it was probably just curious and ran in there when they seen that it was, it's seen somebody see it. So it probably just took cover in the barn. It just breaks my heart because, like I said, and you said, they're not all mean. No. They just want to make it back home to their families. Of course, they're going to smell our garbage cans and smell our fried chicken bones in there. They're going to want to, investigate. And
absolutely.
And so I got to thinking about that, and I am spoiled when it comes to, only certain chicken from certain places, and they'll eat anything edible. It's a sight. The way I eat.
To. That's one of the first questions I get asked when I run into somebody and they find out I'm into the whole Bigfoot thing, and they're not really a believer. They're like, well, what does a Bigfoot eat? Whatever the hell he wants. Okay. I mean, it's like, and that's one of the biggest arguments people have. Well, there's not enough food sources out there to support. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. You've got wild plums, blackberries. I mean, all kinds of berries, plants.
Tex,
And
we throw enough mess out of. I don't
yeah,
even eat every night. Like if I do a big thing of something,
hmm
honey, eat on it 2 days and then throw it in the garbage. I mean, there's
yeah.
still plenty enough left. So think about how wasteful we are as Americans. That
Oh, absolutely.
sometimes we don't eat all our food; we just throw it away. They could eat on our garbage cans alone, if you think about it. I mean, honestly, my family anyway. My family are huge cooks, and a lot of times we'll throw things out after 2 or 3 days, and it'll be a whole meal. You know, that's just my family, of course. So they could survive strictly on garbage cans in 1 month in Glencoe or Gadsden, Alabama.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, but
But it's amazing to me how blind people are to just hard evidence, But if you're, and I
mhm,
was talking to a skeptic the other night on somebody's show over on a Mog show, and you're not going to. The only way he's going to be convinced if he sees one himself, you know. So
that's
and I
what I
get it,
used to talk. That's what I used to say. And then look what happened to me, and now I
yeah,
can't get it out of my brain.
right, and
So,
and 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 it won't ever leave.
mm-mm.
You'll always reflect on it, but it will become one of those fond memories, that you reflect on, because
I've met
you didn't have a
people.
bad, you didn't have a bad experience,
Mhm.
It scared you because,
I was in shock.
yeah,
They
you saw,
didn't come towards me at all. They
yeah,
didn't inch their way towards me at all. They just stood there. It
yeah,
was me that was in some kind of shock that my brain
absolutely,
wasn't even functioning. I told you I thought my gear shift was going to break. I couldn't
yeah,
even put my own car in reverse. I was in some kind of shock. So I know that a lot of people say, well, why didn't you take a video? Your mind don't, I can't even believe I took a picture. If my
right,
phone wouldn't have been hanging on the glass part of my window, of my
hmm
windshield, I don't think I've even thought about getting a picture. But I
yeah,
just so happened to it was sitting there on the windshield. And
right,
so I grabbed it, and just took pictures all the way around. It was it was a scary situation because I was not sure what was going to happen, but
yeah,
they didn't try to scare me or nothing. I think they stepped out. I said this to my very first interview to Duke. I said it on Mark and Becca's show and Miss V. I said it on quite a few shows that they stepped out to let me know, okay, you've been here long enough. You were watching over the property. Go ahead and leave. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not going to leave. You need to go on. They were watching over that property because undoubtedly they had been there for years, according to the family.
oh yeah,
So, anyways,
and you
but
and you hear that a lot, well, like with Gary's, stuff. They've been there, on this property since he was, but since before he was there,
yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
So eh, I think if you don't develop the area or run them off or whatever, I think if they find a place that's comfortable and they feel safe, they're going to stick there, But I do think they have territories like a big cat and they move through them,
I
so they
do
don't
too.
run.
I
So
agree.
they don't.
I
They,
agree that they move because,
yeah,
not just the weather, but according to how much cover they have different places and
right.
whether they've made them some. I love, now, other people might disagree with me, and that's okay that you have different opinions, of course. But I love watching Dr. Maria, I forget her last name, Expedition Bigfoot with Russell
hmm
Accord. And I
Right.
just think I like watching them because everything is done by the book. Nothing's touched
hmm
without gloves. And, everything's got to be bagged. And they have got so much video evidence and footprints and DNA. It's crazy. Um, but I just love to watch this show because every time that they go out, their evidence piles up even more. Like
Yeah.
it beats last time. Like you wouldn't believe the video they've got this time. And so y'all need to watch Expedition Bigfoot. That is a very good show. And they've got some really good footage. So if you do not believe, this is a scientist. And so y'all need to watch her. Dr. Maria, Russell Accord, and what is his name? Bryce. Bryce is the one that tells them what town to go to and where, and they go to where there's the most sightings. But anyways, Tex, is there anything else you want to say before we end this? Because I've enjoyed it, and with you and Pops both, Gary Spikes both, I just really have enjoyed y'all coming. So,
Well, and I'll be co-hosting with you, for
oh
the
yeah,
foreseeable
that's right. I
future.
asked Tex to
And
co-host. This is my second interview on my new
yeah,
computer, and
yeah,
Tex is kindly giving me classes on how to do it. So y'all bear with us because he's going to be my, what do you call it, my teacher behind the scenes and come out
yeah.
when I do lives.
You get a lot of people going, "Oh no, she's in trouble now." But yeah, we're gonna be interviewing a lot of interesting people
Yes.
coming up, and so
And
y'all
Dale
stay tuned.
Boswell. Don't
Yeah,
forget Dale
Dale Wells.
Boswell Sunday.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
Next
so
Sunday,
excited.
right?
We'll be here at
He,
5
he,
p.m. this coming up Sunday. So y'all tune in for that. It's going to be so good because he is a very, very sweet fella with a lot of experience. He's been around really good names as far as music goes. Y'all have got to hear this man sing. And I just thought he would just fit right in. Tex would, with the conversation, especially with this country music. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm a
oh
music lover.
yeah, it don't get no better than Bigfoot and country music, does it?
That's right. That's right. He's actually filming a documentary. Filming crew was at his house. They're actually filming a documentary right now on someone that was real famous in the past, and they're asking him to be a part of that documentary. So he's very excited about that. But yeah, y'all tune in Sunday at 5 o'clock for Dale Boswell.
And y'all come over and see us on Texas Front Porch. That's TEX apostrophe S Front Porch. The link's in the description of the show. So y'all come pay us a visit. And if you're catching this on the Front Porch side of things, if it popped up on your feed or if you get it from the community channel, be sure and subscribe to Southern Belle Bigfoot for me if you would.
Oh,
And
thank you so much. Y'all know that
um,
too. Don't make me cry.
and Sunday at 5 o'clock, don't forget Bigfoot and country music. Don't get no better. So
Yes, it don't. That's the two things you can't live without. Well, first of all, Jesus, and then them two things. But
yeah,
anyways,
right.
okay. If you have had a sighting, please reach out. I'd love to hear your story. I promise not to judge. I'll hear everything you have to say, and you only have to tell the things you're comfortable with saying. So please reach out if you have a story or a testimonial. Okay, Tex, we love you and we appreciate you coming. Thanks so much for visiting, y'all.
We'll see
Love
y'all
y'all.
later. Y'all have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.